Disclaimer, disclaimer, disclaiming. The following hour of programming is brought to you by scientists everywhere, whose motto is science. It's what we do. And by the fine folks who formulated your education, who, if they had a motto, might go something like, teaching you is what we do. And by the universe, whose motto we're still attempting to figure out, even though it seems to be written everywhere we look. And by the collective consciousness of carefully acquired knowledge over the ages, which would like to remind you that what you know is all in your head. Special contributions to today's show were provided to you, the listening audience, by you, the listening audience. Without you, there would be no justifiable way for me to talk in this announcer voice. Many more than mentioned had measurable impact on what lays ahead, but there's no time to mention them now. This Week in Science is coming up next.
I've got the kind of mind that can't get enough. I want to learn everything. I want to fill it all up with new discoveries that happen every day of the week. There's only one place to go to find the knowledge I seek. I want to know what's happening. What's happening? What's happening this week in science? What's happening? What's happening? What's happening this week in science?
Good science to you, Kirsten.
Good science to you too, Justin. Oh, we've done it again. Made it through another week full of science, and we've culled the stories from the websites and brought them here. I'm excited. There was some great news this week. A lot of good news. I brought stories about planets and the moon, a special bird, a very, very special bird, and more reasons why exercise is good for you.
Oh, there's a reason? Somebody
Yeah.
found a reason why it's good for you?
Yeah.
About time. I think all those crazy joggers have some sort of an excuse for what they do. I've got two sort of blood stories. One is about blood itself. The other, a blood-borne pathogen, potentially blood-borne. So that's a fungus among us tale, and a pretty interesting research done by MIT on the effects of the sort of free trade globalization. It's in an economic perspective, going by the numbers.
Interesting.
As well as a couple other neat things going on.
Nice. And for those of you who have gotten to know and love Blair, our intern, over the last couple of weeks, she's not going to be here tonight. She may be back next week. We shall see. She is on a trip. She's traveling the world as we speak. So hopefully she'll be back next Thursday with her Animal Corner, but she might be a bit jet lagged. So maybe 2 weeks. We'll see. We'll see how it works out. So no Animal Corner from Blair tonight. I brought some animal stories, though, to kind of cover that base. Because, I love the animals, too. But why don't we jumpstart this ship of science? You ready?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So in the news this week, I just wanted to talk about some big stories, things going on in the science blogosphere, in the science media sphere. We've been talking a lot since last fall about the faster than light neutrinos, and according to CERN, they have actually put out a press release by this point. The results of the faster than light neutrino may not be valid, but it might
may all come down to a bird dropped a baguette that displaced the cable and nobody plugged it back in. Isn't that?
Nobody plugged it back in. Exactly. And a guy came from the future and waved the baguette around, and then a bird ate his eyes. No.
Ouch.
This has nothing to do with what happened. But yeah, the GPS tracking system, the timing system that they use is GPS based, and it's a very precision instrument. And something happened, and they have two possible errors at this point. It's not necessarily a faulty cable, but there are two possible sources of error. And according to the press release, that source could take the results in opposite directions. So possibly it could negate the result entirely, and they could get rid of it, screw the cable back in and say, oh, we don't have any faster than light neutrinos. They go just as fast as neutrinos are supposed to. Or it could increase the speed of the neutrinos.
Right. Which actually would better fit the scenario that they've seen, like when they've seen the supernova and the neutrinos arrive before the light is arriving.
Yeah.
That ratio has been much greater than what they've seen in the idea in the detector. So it could actually make it a little bit more uniform with that observation, or again, could completely negate it, right?
Right. Yeah. And I think this is one of the interesting things where we see science being done in the public sphere. So the scientists came out last fall and said, we have this result. We don't really know why. It goes against all of our current theories. And what's going on here? So they've done some more experiments, replicated their results, and they're going back to the equipment, making sure that the equipment is all in proper working order, making sure that everything is working the way it should be. Possible sources of error. We don't know what's going to happen there. They are planning more experiments for this year. So more experiments will be done, need to be done. They are not the only group that's going to be doing these experiments. Fermilab is going to be running their own experiments this year. So this is not the end of the story.
That's going to be an even better determination when Fermilab can reproduce a result with completely.
It's an independent replication. That's what science is all about.
And they were discovering what they were calling sort of noise in the system previously, muons that were showing up where there shouldn't be any. It's where I think we first started picking up, or I first got attracted to the idea of this, was a discovery in Fermilab that was sort of mentioned, but then it didn't get reproduced. So yeah, we've got to keep looking at this. I'm really hoping still. I'm still got all my money on the quick muons to be there.
Yeah, I mean,
so much more fascinating, so much more. It demands so much more of science.
I think we have to wait and see, if the theories, if we're seeing stuff that doesn't fit the theories, either it's wrong or we have to change the theories. And so we have to make sure that it's really wrong, and what we do best in science is disprove things. So if we can disprove the faster than light result hypothesis, then we're back to our normal theories. If we can't disprove it, it opens up a whole interesting world. A big one. In other headlines this last week, since last week, there were the leaked documents from the Heartland Institute that we talked about.
Awesome.
And this week, the source of those documents came out in order to say that the documents he got are real documents, because the Heartland Institute has been trying to discredit their validity and saying that they're fakes and the documents have been altered in some way. And so the source came out, Peter Gleich, who is a hydrologist and climate policy analyst. He's a MacArthur Foundation fellow, and he's been arguing for sturdy policies to soften the scale and impact of global warming. And he came forward confessing to having pretended to be somebody else in order to get the documents from the Heartland Institute and to make those available to people. And if you're interested in this story, Andrew Revkin broke the news on Monday on his .earth New York Times blog. And so it kind of tells the story of what happened. Peter Gleich, this is probably going to destroy his career in trying to work toward a greener future.
How so?
Well, his reputation is on the line here. He came out, and his reputation as a source, as somebody people could trust that the media could go to and talk to about issues, his reputation is now sullied, having come out like this. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. I mean, it's interesting and great that he came forward in order to try and verify the documents. But this is just another twist in this Heartland story. Which, by the way, the two, I guess the hypocritical stance that the Heartland Institute is taking about these documents is really interesting. They had no problems with all of the emails that had been hacked from the university during the Climate Gate scandal. They had absolutely no problem with the validity of those emails or where they came from and everything. And now that the type tables are turned, they're having some issues.
So how explosive is this? I mean, is it basically an admission that instead of attacking science, they're just going to generate skepticism about the science, raise doubts about the science? It's basically the game plan, correct, of how to distort global warming to the public.
Right. Yeah. They have a game. Yeah. It's all about having a game plan.
And they speak about it, but they speak about it in that sort of language, right? Like it's kind of blunt.
Yeah. But this is one more thing where now they have an individual who they can point at and say, this is one of the bad guys on the side of climate science. This is one of the bad guys. But anyway, this is
a bad guy because it sounds like a reporter. Sounds like he did a good job being a diligent reporter and getting information. I don't know. I think you want to hire more people.
It wasn't gotten honestly. And so if you're a reporter, you should be getting your news honestly as opposed to... What do you mean?
Reporters would have the worst stories. How do you get a report honestly? I mean, this is serious too. Like we lost a war reporter, veteran war reporter this week in Syria.
Yeah.
But the way that she got
photographer.
Yeah, and the way she got into the scenes to do reporting would be smuggling herself across a border, right? You don't go in through diplomatic channels. You don't go in through like you don't go in with your media press like badge. I'm going to report on your war on your citizens. So it requires people to do extraordinary things sometimes to get truth out. And I don't think that should in any way be reprimanded. And there's lots of people in the media right now in the news who really you can point to and say, yeah, you know what they did wasn't right, but it got information to the public that wouldn't have gotten there naturally, normally, or officially, and we need to stand behind these people. So I have a feeling the scientific community in general isn't going to be too upset with this gentleman for having tricked the Heartland Institute of all people. I mean, that's really, hey, if you win the devil's fiddle because you fooled him, yeah, keep the fiddle. It's not theft. You tricked the devil of all people. Come on.
Nice. All right, give me a science story.
Okay, here we go. Deadly funky fungus walks among us and can sense our status, adapt a survival solution based on it. This is an international research team which made this discovery. They discovered an elaborate and complex process by which the fungus Candida albicans binds to the immune system.
Isn't that yeast?
It's a yeast, correct.
It's a yeast.
Correct. So it's the yeast that we know of commonly. It's something that can naturally be on the body. I don't think it's baker's yeast. I think it's different. This is the one that is on the body, and then sometimes if it's see this a lot in children early morning anyway, but you get thrush where it coats the tongue.
Right.
It's also the fungus that's responsible for yeast infections. So it's pretty common. It's even though it's actually rare to get it as a bloodborne disease, it accounts for a quarter of bloodborne infections in the United States when you're being treated in the hospital. But 1 out of 4 of these, which even though it's rare, I guess it's hard to get supposedly. The there's apparently not a lot of bloodborne infections that get treated in hospitals, but it counts to about a quarter of them. So what they were looking at is how it takes advantage of the system, how the infections occur. And they found something that they didn't really expect, I suppose. It's just the wonderful thing about science. We're constantly discovering these things. They found that the Candida albicans actually binds with the immune system signaling molecule, interleukin 17A, right? Interleukin. And when it binds with it, it then mounts a sort of counteractive measures depending on what the status is of the immune system currently. So it can decide, well, everything seems to be, the immune system's really strong right now. Maybe I won't really try to make a big presence. It can see that it's a little bit depressed and take advantage of that. It can do things that'll trick the immune system somehow into allowing it to survive. What's also interesting is that they found that the fungus itself, as it enters, isn't likely to become as virulent and disease-causing as it is once it has bound with the interleukin. And they think that the interleukin is actually modifying the fungus to make it become more virulent. And of course, not the interleukin's fault. It's, it shook hands or whatever, it didn't know.
It's just a way that the interaction, it's a side effect of the interaction.
Yeah. So... Yeah. So the quote here from Dr. Palmer, who is assistant professor of microbiology, immunity, and parasitology at LSU Health Sciences Center in New Orleans. It's a bit like the fungus is listening in on the conversations of our immune system, and so is having to best determine how to react and survive in our tissues. This may also be a crucial step in determining when this opportunist decides to invade host tissue and cause life-threatening disease in a immunosuppressed patient, which is it's sort of an interesting way of phrasing something that we sort of can take. It's kind of intuitive, right? If your immune system is suppressed, you're more likely to become infected with things. That just makes sense, right? You think that there's a constant onslaught and your immune system's always fighting it, and therefore, if it's got less resources to fight, more stuff gets in. This almost sounds as though, based on it checks the immune system first. And if everything's really strong, maybe not. Maybe we won't go after, full tissue right now. Maybe we won't try to, invade the system. But based on this interaction and sort of getting the download, the status update of how things are going. Yeah, things are big. Yeah. Oh, really? You fought a lot of diseases lately? You're fighting off some rash somewhere? So you're pretty busy around here? Okay. Well, I'm just going to go hang out over here in the corner. Is it all right if I have some coffee? I'm just going to chill over here for a minute. And then, and then decides whether or not it's a good time. Yeah, this is according to the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, there are more than 20 species of Candida yeast that can cause infections in humans. So it is something that is it's pretty available. It's pretty readily out there. And Dr. Palmer concludes here, disrupting or manipulating the fungal sensing of these host molecules could trick the fungus, essentially suppressing an infection or enabling us to eliminate this potentially dangerous fungus before it causes problems. Although it seems like you may be able to do that in a lab, but to do that in a human being, first you'd have to identify the infection, and you would have to find a way to suppress that interaction. Almost sounds like you'd have to be suppressing that before the interaction took place, right?
Right. No, you'd want to find a way to stop it from happening before it could become a problem. Right.
But wow, you really got to be on it. I mean, you'd have to take your anti-fungus pills every day, pretty much, or I don't know.
Well, if you are somebody who's immune compromised, maybe it's something that is a good idea. If you're healthy, not necessarily something you're going to be thinking about all the time.
Absolutely. That makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. That's fascinating. I love finding out what the interactions that take place. And so the fact that there are kind of side effects that our body didn't want to happen, but that's just what happens. And so another species can take advantage of it and use it to their benefit. Yeah, I'm just
Yeah,
gonna take
our
this over
system isn't
here.
perfect. That's what like all inflammation really is, right? It's our immune system perhaps overreacting.
Very often. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very, very often. Well, what else goes on in our body? Well, our brain takes a lot of juice. Our brain takes the majority of, maybe not the majority, but a large portion of the calories that you use go towards your brain. And a long time ago, people thought that the brain subsisted only on blood sugar, but then glucose, but then found that there are these cells called astrocytes that store a compound called glycogen, which can be converted to glucose should the body need, or the brain in this case, need energy. So researchers have been trying to figure out exactly what interactions take place to get these glycogen stores in action, or to make more of them, to deplete them. What actually causes an interaction to take place? What tires out your brain? Some Japanese researchers showed that brain cells can be highly affected by exercise. And so last year in the Journal of Physiology, they published on 2 groups of adult male rats, one of which ran on a treadmill and the other one did not run on the treadmill. They just sat on the treadmill. They were like, hey, rat, there's a treadmill. Don't use it. And so then they looked at the brains of the rats to see what was going on with glycogen, how brain glycogen stores changed. And they found that exercise lowered the stores of glycogen in the brain. So, and the more interesting part of this is it wasn't just all over the brain, but particular areas of the brain involved in learning, memory, thinking, attention, were the ones that were hit the hardest. So the frontal cortex, the hippocampus, and also those that are involved in actually making the animal move. So the motor cortex was pretty hard hit. But that would be expected. You're exercising, those areas of the brain involved in making the exercise happen are going to be really active. And so, sure, maybe the astrocytes that support the nerve cells in the motor cortex would be extra active during that time. So they'll get depleted. But what's interesting is the whole thinking and memory and these things that are, and attention, these areas related to higher cognitive functions in the brain that shouldn't necessarily go side by side with exercise. So a new study has been published, and they have looked at 2 different groups of rat again. One that they were given one single session of exercise, and then they were allowed to eat afterwards. And then their glycogen levels were looked at. Then the other group of animals were allowed to exercise consistently over 4 weeks, not just having the one session of exercise, but 4 weeks of exercise. And so they found that, excuse me, I'm going to sneeze. I turned off my microphone. Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. They found that, I'm going to sneeze again. This is not good. They found that after exercise, the stores were depleted again, but the food, high in carbohydrates, the food re-energized those parts of the brain. So quickly afterwards, they increased as much as 60%. So those areas of the brain that were greatly depleted before were now, with food given right after exercise, replenished once again. This is kind of interesting. And they say that there's this New York Times article that I'm looking at, and they say that the astrocytes had overcompensated. And they called it a form of brain carbo loading, which is kind of interesting. So after 24 hours, the overcompensation dropped and everything came back to just about normal. The animals that were allowed to exercise over 4 weeks, however, they got into a sustained mode of exercise and eating, and they had some really, really great super compensation. It was the normal, it was their new baseline. They never dropped back down to what normal was before. And so, looking at the brain, their baseline levels of glycogen stores were higher after 4 weeks of exercise than they were in the beginning. So this suggests possibly that people who exercise might benefit brain-wise from nice carbohydrate-rich snack after you exercise. Could help a little bit. And for you weekend warriors out there, that's not necessarily the best way to go about doing it for your brain. You might want to consider a more consistent exercise regime in order to get your brain and these areas of the brain related to attention, memory, and thinking, learning, to be stronger, better, have more energy, resources at hand, so that when you come up against not just something that challenges you physically, but mentally, your brain is able to deal with it. So anyway.
Does that mean I can lose calories in exercise just by thinking a lot?
Actually, yeah, you can actually. Your body withers away, but your brain uses a lot of calories.
And so
if you're studying, it's a really good idea or thinking really hard about something. If you're putting together a project and you're working really hard, make sure you have snacks. It's good for your brain.
Yeah, that no-carb diet's going to kill your brain cells. It's worse than the hard drugs. But no, what I was thinking, though, I was like, have you ever noticed the really neurotic comedians? Like the constant talking, just the absolute neurotics in this world, all tend to be really skinny. Maybe, I mean, just from my experience, this is totally non-scientific, but I have a feeling that all neurotics are skinny people because they're just burning through calories with constant thought and worry.
They're using their brains. That's right. Using up those calories. And in other how exercise is good for you and your brain and your mental health, a new study that's out from the Tel Aviv University suggests that exercising is really important to promoting more positive mental health, beneficial mental health that can help you avoid depression and burnout rates at work. And so if your work environment is not conducive to getting exercise and taking care of yourself, you might want to suggest that they implement some exercise plans, because it's been shown that people who exercise are much less likely to burn out at work than people who don't exercise. And so in this study, they showed that how many people was it? 1,632 healthy Israeli workers in the private and public sector. They completed questionnaires and when they came to clinics for routine checkups and had follow-up appointments over the period of 9 years. So this isn't just a very short-term study. It's a very long-term study. They've been looking at people over several years, and not just 5 people, but thousands of people. The findings indicate that increases in depression predict an increase in job burnout, vice versa. And when physical activity is taken into account, groups that engaged in 150 minutes or more of exercise a week saw less burnout and depression. So you can maybe help your workout by help your work out, not your workout, by suggesting that they let you work out. Yes. You got another story?
Yeah, this is something published a couple weeks ago, actually, in the journal Brain and Language. They did some brain imaging research and revealed that the region of the brain that is activated when you touch something, say with your fingers, the sort of central region of the brain, sensing region, sensualizing, not sure, is also activated when you hear a metaphor that has a like a texture metaphor to it. For instance, is if somebody had a really rough day, it would fire off sort of much in the same way as if you were touching a rough surface. It's a very fascinating idea that when we use metaphors that have this sort of these stand-in words with textures to describe a meaning or a feeling or something, that the brain actually interprets them the same way as they would actually touching something. We've seen this before too in the motor neurons, right? That we know pretty well now. When you watch somebody run on television, if you see somebody jumping, the part of your brain that would be firing off if you were running or jumping sort of sympathetically mirrors that and is firing off. So you sort of experience. It also helps explain sometimes when we're watching action movies or love stories, on film, that sort of thing, how we actually are experiencing it can seem somewhat visceral. We can sort of get a little bit of the adrenaline going in the chase scene or what have you. It's because our brain is actually firing off at this. But it kind of points to a real importance then of coming up with good analogies, so that you're not disgusting people accidentally. I think back to this one. This totally reminds me of the first explanation I heard about the way gravity sort of warps and twists as our planet spins. And it was described as putting a spoon in a jar of molasses and twisting it. And I don't know why that analogy bothered me so much, but this might have something to do with it. I may be picturing myself putting my hand in a jar of molasses and slowly turning it to understand that metaphor. We lost Kirsten? See, I thought, when I'm talking about the brain and she doesn't pipe in, it is sort of a hint that maybe something's gone bad. All right, well, this is a great time. Oh, wait, we can't go to the break because she's got to be here for the break to do all the break stuff. She'll be back before the music's over, right? Should we bet on it? Otherwise, I got to make up the ads. I got to make it up them. We'll be right back with more This Week in Science after this. Let's see if she makes it back.
Thank you. And I have things to tell you. Twis would like to thank Audible.com for sponsoring this episode of This Week in Science. Audible.com is the leading provider of audiobooks with over 75,000 different titles in a variety of genres. Twis has found many science-based books in the Audible library and knows that you can too. You can start a free trial today and get a free audiobook download through Audible. All you have to do is sign up at audiblepodcast.com/twis. It's audiblepodcast.com/twis. Go right there, right now, audible.com, audiblepodcast.com/twis, right now, for your free download. That's right. Twis would like to also have you read along with the Twis Book Club. This month, we are reading Carl Zimmer's A Planet of Viruses, which is available through Amazon or at a bookstore near you. Additionally, Twis has merchandise that you might enjoy. We have a fun, where's my little CD here? We have our 2010 Science Music compilation CD that you can have too. We also have World Robot Domination t-shirts, and you can get these if you go to our website, twis.org. If you're heading over to twis.org, We'd also love it if you would make a donation. Twis is sponsored by listeners like you, and your donations pay for our hosting, bandwidth, contractors we need to hire, and lots of fun things that we try to do for the show. We appreciate any amount that you can give. $2 to $5 to $5 million, whatever you're willing to give, we definitely appreciate. You make the show possible. So while you're at the website, check out one of the show pages, the most recent episode maybe. Take a listen and click on the donate button while you're there. We thank you for your support. We really couldn't do it without you.
Our first assumptions were correct. Disprove the rest. It's hard. The methods of hypothesis and patience are the only things I need. Goggles and go looking for the things I couldn't see. Methods of hypothesis and patience are the only things I need. Put on a pair of goggles and go looking for the things I couldn't see.
And we are back. This is This Week in Science. I hope you enjoyed the first half of the show. Justin is destroying things back at his side of this program. I don't know what's going on over there. I think he was kicking his computer. I don't know what's happening. But this is the show where you get to hang out and listen to science talk. We talk about science, it's fun
I've
stuff.
got a pop quiz for you.
Pop quiz?
Pop quiz. Okay, it's a Monty Hall thing. Do you know the Monty Hall, the 3 doors? There's behind door number 1, door number 2, door number 3. Behind one of these doors is a fantastic getaway 3-week vacation anywhere in the world you choose. Behind the other 2 doors, there's a bag of jelly garbage.
Yeah, or if you're playing one of those Japanese game shows, you're supposed to run through the doors that you choose, and
Either
the
land in
ones
the
that
jelly
are not,
garbage or
you land in the jelly garbage, or you hit a brick wall if you're wrong. Yeah.
Okay, so here's how it works. So you're going to pick one of the doors. So go ahead, pick door number 1, door number 2, door number 3.
Number 2.
So you pick door number 2. Okay, so then the announcer goes, all right, behind door number 1, we'll open that and reveal the bag of jelly garbage. So now you get asked this. Do you want to switch to door number 3 or do you want to stay with door number 2?
Gonna stay with door number 2.
Right, because it feels like it's a 50-50 guess, right? So far you've been right. Now it's just down to 2. Turns
it's
out
still 1/3. It's still 1/3 probability. It's basically 33.333333%.
Correct. But if you switch,
each door,
your percentage chance of getting it correct is 2/3.
Oh. But you haven't seen what's behind. Okay, yeah.
I haven't seen it, but you know one of the other ones is wrong. So now if you switch, always if you switch, you've got the door that you've got picked. There's another door left, and the third one's been eliminated. If you switch to the door number 3, you have a 2/3 or 66 infinite sixes, 0.6 percentage chance of being correct. And it's kind of it's an intuitive thing for people, but the way to sort of, if this one bothers you, and I've talked to some people who are like, oh yeah, you switch. I've talked to people like, why would I switch? It's 50-50 now. Why would I bother? Because it's actually 2/3 chance that you're going to be correct if you switch. If you pick the door that you picked, right? The chances that if they just revealed all the doors and saw if you won or lost, it's always 1/3 chance. Always 1/3, right?
3 doors.
So, right. So if it's always 1/3 of a chance that the door you picked is correct, then there's always a 2/3 chance that the right answer is behind one of the other 2 doors. And while they've eliminated one of those doors, the chances is still 2 out of 3 that it's on that side somewhere. a very good friend of mine didn't believe me, so he got out some cups and put a bottle cap underneath one of them and ran it a few times. He wouldn't switch. I did switch. It phenomenally worked out, better than the odds in both directions. He got like 1 out of 6 right, and I was wrong only once out of 6 times. So we actually beat the odds in both directions. He lost more than he should have, and I won a little bit more than I should have. But it was definitely skewed to one side.
You needed more replications. You needed to do it more times.
At that time, it's proven. No, but mathematically, it just makes sense, especially if you then start adding doors.
Mathematically, you're right. Mathematically, it does make sense. And it is counterintuitive. Your brain does not work in a...
It's all reset. Now we're down to 50-50. And I picked one. I feel good about it. I'm attached to it. My decision. I believe in myself. But going in, you're always locked into a third. And it starts to make more sense when you don't do it in 3 doors. If you'd make it 4 doors, right? And they open 2 wrong doors. Then you really get the feeling like, well, I only had a 1 out of 4 chance then. So 3/4 of the time I would have been wrong. If you opened up to 10 doors, right? You picked one. They opened 8 of them, and there's 1 more door over there. Of course you switch to it. You switch to it every time. But for some reason, when it's 3, it makes the calculation a little less intuitive to people. Anyway, that was just a fun pop quiz number thing I learned recently.
I think it is. And the Monty Hall problem is not something that's only reducible to these kinds of game shows or games. The Monty Hall problem is something that comes up actually many times, many different places that you would be surprised to find it.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, let me run through some space news. I've got a whole bunch of space stories. So researchers wanted to know why the moon does not have active volcanoes. We know that there are moonquakes. Moonquakes, like earthquakes, are caused by the movement of magma, by molten rock moving. So we know that there's a dynamic interior to the moon. Some stuff's going on there. It's not completely cooled. It's not just a hunk of granite sitting out there in space. It's a very dynamic place still. But why are there no volcanoes if we know that it has moonquakes? So researchers wanted to find out what's going on in the interior, but they couldn't really figure out, we can't dig there. It's hard to get to the moon. We have orbiters that are there now scanning, taking photos and stuff, but how can we really try and figure this out? So they used moon rocks from the Apollos. This the methodology to this study just blows my mind. They used moon rocks from the Apollo 17 moon landing that were brought back, right? So they have these rocks. They used the rocks to develop synthetic copies of the moon rocks. So they basically took samples of the moon rocks and were like, we can make something that's just like that. And so in a lab, they chemically created moon rocks. So they have these chemically created moon rocks, which they then, if you could think about if you had a dynamic surface of the moon at some point, that the moon rocks might be engulfed, taken into the interior of the moon and put under incredible pressure and temperature. Well, that's what they tried to do. They're like, okay, let's put these synthetic moon rock particles under pressure and temperature. So they did that. And then they scanned these particles that they created that were under incredible pressure and temperature with powerful X-ray beams, like powerful X-ray beams from a synchrotron that they got from a synchrotron. So very high powered X-rays. They found that the density of these moon rocks, for the most part, the particles were lighter than the surrounding materials. So you'd expect that to float to the surface and maybe come out. So in the Earth's mantle, lighter magma will float, kind of bubble up to the surface. And so it's a lighter stuff that comes out. It has to do with how dense stuff is. If you think of air, helium will float in air, whereas if you just fill a balloon with normal air, it's going to just stay in place. It's not going to float. It might sink even because of the weight of the balloon. So a lot of the materials that they found were very similar to what was around them and weren't really gonna or were lighter. But then they found that the titanium aspects of these Apollo rocks were really, really dense, and so probably have sunk down to the interior of
Oh,
the
no.
of the
Does that
moon.
mean the moon has a titanium core and we're going to have to go mine it?
Probably, right. So because of the differences in density, the titanium stuff is going closer to the core. It's solidifying. It's everything's cooling down. But and they say after descending, magma formed from these near surface rocks, very rich in titanium, and accumulated at the bottom of the mantle, a bit like an upside down volcano. Today, the moon is still cooling down, as are the melts in its interior. In the distant future, the cooler and therefore solidifying melt will change in composition, likely making it less dense than its surroundings. And this lighter magma could make its way again up to the surface, forming an active volcano on the moon.
Sweet.
So there are no volcanoes on the moon now, but there might be in the future.
Nice.
Volcanoes might it's really fascinating. There may just be volcanoes on the moon in the future, but for now, not so much. The titanium is holding everything down. Another moon story, the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter camera, LROC, has been taking pictures of the lunar surface, and they've found these deep gashes in the moon. They're kind of like scratch marks, if you can imagine fingers scratching in dust or sand, the gouges that would be created. They've seen gouges like these on the surface, and they're called, what were they called? I'm blanking on it. Never mind. I'm going to forget about that part of it. But what they suggest is that even though the moon has been thought to be undergoing contraction as it cools, and it's been thought that for years and years and years, just contracting and cooling down, and that we're not going to be seeing a lot of surface geological activity on the surface, this is evidence that there was some kind of stretching. So at some points on the moon's crust within the last 50 million years, so relatively recent geologically speaking, as opposed to 4.5 billion years, which is how old the moon is, these stretchings have happened on the surface in opposition to the contractile forces. So there's something going on in the dynamics of the moon that suggests there is still geologic activity occurring. And I think that ties in nicely with the X-ray studies suggesting that there may be a changing in the dynamics of the mantle, as everything cools, changing the dynamics. In addition to that, moving on to more space news, red dwarf star is being orbited by a super Earth that is really hot and really close to the star. So not a really nice place for us to maybe exist. But in the meantime, they've used Hubble to image this planet as it transited to be able to take a really good infrared picture of the planet to see what its atmosphere is like. And they found that it's mainly water, that it's like a big sauna gas planet, very little rock, that the rock aspect of the planet is much less than what we have here on Earth. But there's a lot of water vapor, a lot of water gas on this planet. So it is a super Earth sauna.
Mm-hmm.
I say we send the Russians there. You have sauna, banya. Give me some Twis. Additionally, Mars. There's some evidence from Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter that probably sometime in the last several million years, there's been an earthquake on Mars, and that this earthquake on Mars caused boulders to fall off a cliff. So the boulders and the tracks that they left, not etched away by the forces of wind and erosion, these boulder tracks are still quite visible on the surface of Mars. And so researchers were able to look at the pictures that they have had of these boulders, how far they fell, how big the boulders were, and estimated that this earthquake was probably somewhere in the 7.0 magnitude area.
That's pretty rocking.
Pretty rockin'.
Good
And so even while other researchers say that there's probably no liquid water on Earth, this suggests that maybe there are active volcanoes still that we haven't seen more proof of, but there might be active volcanoes. There might be activity yet beneath the surface, and maybe even reservoirs of liquid water, which is pretty awesome. And then some researchers, a big team of researchers, found rocks in Russia that are 2.8 billion years old, 2.8 billion year old volcanic rocks that still don't match what is around them. These rocks have a different isotopic composition than rocks that are younger. And these isotopes, specifically tungsten is one that it was important in this analysis, suggest that these rocks were present in the mantle of the Earth in the time period before we were hit by some big planetoid object and the moon was formed.
Interesting.
So, yeah, and the going hypothesis is that when the Earth was struck, it was hit so hard that everything liquefied. The heat of the collision was so intense that everything would have melted and homogenized and been mixed together, and you wouldn't be able to know up from down, right from left. Everything would have homogenized. But and from that point forward, been this younger new rock that would form. Somehow, some chunks of rock managed to survive and maintain this signature that suggests that they were there before the moon.
That's wild.
Pretty cool. So basically, at the beginnings of our solar system, just tens of millions of years after our solar system was formed. So the implications of this is that if this is proved correct, replicated, then we'll see that these rocks could tell us a lot more about the conditions that were present in the early environment of the solar system. They could tell us about forces that were present during the formation or the development of the Earth. There are a lot of things that are very interesting geologically.
Could it even push back the age of our solar system?
Oh, maybe. I don't know about that. Yeah.
10 million years. I mean, if it's 10 million years after it formed, that doesn't sound like a whole heck of a lot of time to get stuff done.
Yeah, and that's a really interesting point, actually, is the fact that they're saying that when the Earth the Earth would have been a lot smaller, but and so maybe it didn't take that long for it to cool down, but that just tens of millions of years after the formation of the solar system, that the Earth would have had a mantle that would be capable of producing rock that we could have a signature of now. So, I'm sure this is going to be a big question.
We aren't from this solar system.
Ooh.
So this is, actually, I don't have it up here, but there's another story talking about how, even though we've sort of done these calculations on how many planets now are out there circling stars after we've done all these observations, and it's somewhere in the neighborhood of, like 4 to 8. Like, we're a pretty typical solar system here at 8 and maybe 8.5 if you count Pluto. But they're discovering that there are many, 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 many more rogue planets. There's sort of a drift in our galaxy that aren't really. They're not really chasing a star, right? They're just sort of floating around out there. How fascinating would that be if it turns out Earth isn't even from the solar system? We're aliens. Ooh.
We came here from somewhere else.
And then somehow we like showed up between like Venus and Mars and like kicked Mars out a little bit further. Like,
it's definitely possible. I mean,
global
we know
cooling
that
on Mars. Like, no, the rogue planet's destroying our climate. Ah! They got to come up with a mission to destroy the Earth. And then unfortunately, the technology wasn't quite right, and they're going to be arriving here in another couple of years.
Dope. Yeah, but we do know that the planets do migrate in solar systems. And so a planet that could start far out in a solar system could migrate much closer in over historical time. And that's, in fact, what they think the super Earth that I was talking about did, that it might have started out much further away and then migrated in, and that the water probably went from ice to nice liquid balminess to now it's this steamy sauna. It's probably, the atmosphere is probably expanded, and then it's this steamy sauna, but it's probably migrated from someplace else. And our own planets, the positions they're in right now, not the positions they started in. So, rogue planets, yeah, where are you coming from?
Yeah, I just found this on phys.org.com. It says researchers say galaxy may swarm with nomad planets. In fact, there may be 100,000 times more nomad planets in the Milky Way than there are stars. So that's quite a big difference from we were calculating, I mean, somewhere around a half dozen or so planets per star. Now, now we have 100. It's possible that we've got 100,000 times more nomad planets in this one galaxy than we have stars. That's a phenomenally large number. Wouldn't it be great if our planet really did like come from a smaller nucleus, little seed planet nomad that was floating around? It's kind of jumped into to our solar system. That would be pretty awesome.
It's a fascinating idea.
Yeah, 100,000 times more stars. I mean, that right there has just increased the potential of planets from something like, what would be the number be? Like,
I'm not going to do the math right now.
400 sextillion in the known universe to something many
Bigger.
Thousands of times more powers, a lot more zeros. That's quite a big number.
Yeah.
Even when you get into big numbers, that's, other really big numbers would look at that number and go, that's a big number. So I've got something from the Minion mailbag here. I know we're probably not quite at the end here, but this is this was sent in after we did, I guess, our previous show. It says, Justin, thanks for debunking some global warming debunkers. I liked that segment a lot. You discussed the Earth is warming in a human-caused way. One thing I would like to hear more about is the idea that global warming is not only man-caused, it's actually woman-caused as well, but that it is also bad. There are many natural things that also could be bad, such as doomsday asteroid. Destroying such an asteroid with lasers or something to save the planet would be man interfering with nature, but a good thing in my book. Man affects his environment constantly in many ways. Could you explain why a warmer planet and tons of melting ice is actually a bad thing? Is it bad for man or just polar bears? Is change of any kind always bad? Do we have some model or study that shows a warmer Earth being a catastrophic outcome? Doomsday movies don't count, but part of the apathy of the public, I think, is that they don't take global warming as a danger, applying to them or to their own children. Seth in Pocatello, Idaho, who is a new listener, and he apologizes if we've explained this in previous episodes. Yeah, we've talked about this to some degree, pretty good degree, in previous episodes. Kirsten, do you want to take a shot? What's some bad stuff that could happen on account of global warming?
Well, global warming, the ocean levels rise. The majority of the Earth's population is located in coastal regions. And so if the ocean levels rise, that's going to primarily affect those situated in the coastal regions. They'll have to move. They won't be able to farm. They won't be able to live in the places that they used to live anymore. So they'll be affected by weather much differently. So people are going to be on the move. It's going to.
And one thing
Go
to
ahead.
that I always I hear a lot in return is like, well, if the water levels rise, we'll be able to put up some sort of breaker walls in Florida and New Orleans and that sort of thing. We'll be able to take care of it.
And Bangladesh and
right.
I mean,
then
if you think about all the places.
And the important thing of that too is the we. Like, who is we? Is we just the United States? Are you talking about just that California is going to be okay? Like, are you talking about your city is at a high enough elevation? Are you like which we are you saying when you say it'll be all right? We'll be able to handle the sea rise. So it could be very catastrophic, right? For a lot of people in this world.
It could be catastrophic for a number of people, but the important thing is it's also going to shift. It will also shift water availability so that people historically who have had water may not have water anymore. So it's going to shift things in a way that is going to impact political change, because people are going to start worrying about where they're going to get stuff, where they're going to live, how they're going to get clean water. And a lot of people, billions of people, are going to be affected, and governments are going to be hard pressed to be able to deal with those issues. So we're going to be up against it's at a point when we're not trying to solve the problems through science anymore, trying to mitigate the problems. Politics will step in, and that's where it's a whole bag of worms.
So here's also, this is something we've discussed because there's other studies that have shown this. This is from, 2 days ago, news at Princeton edu, at www.princeton.edu. It's in their main/news archive. It's dated 2 days ago. Basically they've done another study that shows what was the storm of the century, more likely to be the storm of the decade. We're going to have far more hurricanes and tropical storms because there's going to be more moisture. It's not just that the sea level rises, but also there's more moisture in the atmosphere. That more moisture in the atmosphere can fuel hurricanes, tropical storms, along with a little bit warmer sea temperature. That's like the perfect formula for it. Another one, we've been looking at the winters, the severe winters that Europe has been having. Northern Europe is going to get less of the conveyor belt from the Atlantic if we have a rapid melt-off. And so you'll have a lot more precipitation when it's cold. You have areas that traditionally could fall below freezing for a lot of their winter, but doesn't mean it's snowing. It just means it's really cold. You have the addition of all this moisture that's running through there, as well as less warm air currents coming up north. You have more of those cold days in Northern Europe. Again, London is the same latitude north as Juneau, Alaska, right? It's pretty far up there. And you add more precipitation to it. Now you have a lot more snow days. Now you can see how that could be troubling. But there's a very crucial question that is asked here by Seth. And I think part of it's very important because it's something I also hear a lot when talking about this. He says, man affects his environment constantly in many ways. Could you explain why a warmer planet and tons of melting ice is actually a bad thing? Okay, here it is. Is change of any kind bad, right? So
not
change
necessarily,
happens,
no.
right?
Change happens. Exactly.
Change happens. What's different about this is when we're looking historically, this is a very rapid change in the environment. So that's when the concerns about how wildlife is going to react, how nature is going to react, if it's going to be able to adjust to a really rapid change that it hasn't experienced previously on a global scale. Right? So that's one level of concern there. The other is before the changes that happened before that were severe, there were no humans here. Now, we've sort of entrenched ourselves, right, in these cities, in these towns, in these regions. We're used to being either farming communities or being a community that fishes or that has a lot of seaside property. I mean, the city of New Orleans is below sea level for a lot of it. There's a lot of sort of odd little places like that are coastal and yet have managed to eke out and survive. So it's the rapidity of the change is part of it. But it's also the fact that humanity is so entrenched ourselves in being able to survive in different parts of the planet that a rapid climate change could really affect what we're set up for surviving. And this is on a large scale because there's 7 billion of us now entrenched and living here on planet Earth.
I do have to say that, if you are arguing for change, you don't like the way things are necessarily, it's
More
not
hurricanes.
Things will change whether or not you want them to. It's humanity will survive, but it will not be in the same way that we are used to. So, things are going to be drastically affected.
Right. So here's a way here's an example, analogy I've just come up with here to explain why that change is going to perhaps be difficult to adjust to. So if instead of climate, because everyone has sewage systems or different things that are built up in the infrastructure of their cities that are designed to handle certain things. And if the climate's changing in different places dramatically, it'll affect things. So one thing to consider is if the fault lines were to migrate and to move and to be showing up in different places. The city of San Francisco can survive a 7.0 earthquake. When you see a 7.0 earthquake happen in certain regions of, say, China or Iran, where they're not prepared for those earthquakes to take place, it's immense, massive devastation. We actually have had some in South America recently that a city like San Francisco that is now built around knowing that there's an earthquake fault and that this whole city burned down to the ground once was really prepared for that specific type of stress on its buildings. If you just took those fault lines underneath that cause these earthquakes and just sort of jumbled them up and moved them to different places, even in California, you wouldn't have to move very far. If you just moved it inland to California, that 7.0 earthquake could do untold devastation. Because while there's some of those standards are built into the housing, they're not to the same degree that they are in a place like San Francisco. So that's what it's going to be. It's going to tax and challenge the infrastructures of cities that are already existing, that are already serving as the home to millions and millions of people with something that they may not be prepared for. So that's the challenge. And you can take a very laissez-faire attitude and say, well, we'll just move where the farms are. So we put the farms up further north. People move away from the coast. The foothills become the coast. Like, sure, yeah. Nobody's predicting that the life on Earth will cease to exist. And it's not that even just a changing climate is that bad, really, in and of itself, if not for the fact that we have built a 7 billion person population on this planet under a certain set of conditions, and the fact that it is changing so quickly, we may not have the time that some people I think that we have to prepare for this.
Yeah, and I watched an interesting video online, and I can't find it right at the moment, but there's a scientist who puts forward not scientific reasons to be for or against this, but a statistics probability reason to think seriously about why you would want to affect change, to be part of trying to solve the problem as opposed to doing nothing. And it's a simple choice experiment that he puts forward where he basically takes the extreme views and says, okay, say nothing happens, say everything happens. I don't remember everything exactly, but it's a choice experiment. And you end up put against the choice of do nothing and see pretty much everything modern civilization in upheaval and so much trouble that you can't even think your way out of the problem. Or you have the choice of doing nothing and nothing happens, or you do something and maybe you stop it from happening. Maybe you make it less problematic. And so if you think about it logically, just in terms of what the problem is and what you should be thinking about, I mean, it really rationally, it comes down to, well, for economic, political, scientific, so many different reasons, the best choice is to try and do something because we sure will be sorry if we don't do anything and something happens.
Yeah.
And I'll try and find the link
to
to that video because it's pretty interesting.
And I just want to point out too, in our chat room, we've got a guest who's saying that Mount St. Helens adds more carbons to the atmosphere. See, there's a lot of this that's getting put out there, and it's absolutely untrue. Volcanoes produce very little of what's causing greenhouse gases.
They produce a lot. Volcanoes are a significant factor in atmospheric.
Very small percentage. It's a very small percentage compared to what mankind is producing. You know,
I don't know if that's correct. I'd like to see the numbers. I don't know if that's correct.
Let's pull up let's find those numbers, because my understanding is it's a very tiny percentage of the carbon that's getting added to it.
Yeah, Mathno in the chat room is saying volcanoes produce particulate matter, and that's a huge factor.
It is, but it's not.
Particulate matter ends up in the atmosphere and can actually lead to cooling. And it's thought that volcanic activity was related to the Little Ice Age. You know, lots of different things like that.
Right. It's not putting out carbons that are contributing to greenhouse gases. I mean, there is some in the nitrogens that are being put out, but its impact on global greenhouse warming gases is somewhere in the neighborhood of what's going out there right now. It's something in the neighborhood of like under 1%. It's like right around like it's a point something. It's really ridiculously small. You know, in the past, one of the big ways that you could get a lot of particulate matter and carbon out there too is you could have massive forest fires, that sort of thing. You know, a lot of times the volcanoes, we're talking about particulate matter. We've seen forest fires that have raged for months here, even with people cutting forest lines and dropping big airplane-filled, things of water on them, and fire suppressive stuff. But here we go. Yeah, somebody's got it up here. Yeah, it's a very tiny, small. What is that? There's no numbers. 65 to 3.9 million tons a year versus 29 billion tons a year is
interesting.
The versus fossil fuel use. Yeah.
Interesting. I didn't think it was that big of a discrepancy. Fascinating.
And even the big volcanoes in the past, it's rare that you get something that's gonna contribute to global warming.
Yeah.
Like perhaps the ice, the early ice age, because of was doing a reflective thing with the particulate matter. That one of the ideas is that could have been volcanoes. I like the idea of forest fires still much better because if you picture
humans burning things, right?
Well, no, without humans even. You could even use lightning because the forests today, which still we can have fires that burn for months. We have so much, we have an active response to it. We've cut down a lot of it, and we've cleared a lot of the dead lumber that's on the ground. A lot of our forests in California are actually relatively new growth. They're not hundreds of years old. They've been, replanted, or it's been reforested because we've got an active lumber industry, which actually helps protect from forest fires. So if you can imagine the pre-man really monitoring this, it could be the errant caveman or the errant, hitting those rocks and a couple sparks go off in the wind, and what could happen, right? It could be that. But those fires, you can picture a fire running unchecked through a forest that's gone through a 20-year drought for years and years. So there's lots of ways that you could get somewhat rapid changes, but it still does not account for next to anything of what we've been able to do with the burning of fossil fuels.
It's very true.
So there's a lot of misinformation out there that persists. And there isn't a retaliation to that I have seen in the media. There isn't. I mean, I've read things, right, like that are explaining, but I'm not outside of us talking on this show and the stuff I read. It's the stuff I've read before coming onto the show. There's not a lot of talk about it out there, and that's what really needs to change.
Yep, I'm agreed on that. Absolutely. We are over our allotted time, but I had a couple of stories I wanted to get to very quickly. Alex the Parrot, he lives on in the form of Science. A new paper published in the journal Animal Cognition relates some experiments that were done using Alex prior to his untimely death in 2007. Alex the parrot, you may know, he's known for his amazing language abilities. He's Irene Pepperberg's special parrot who's always leading animal behaviorists and people who study cognition to question the divisions between different groups of animals and what intelligence actually is. Alex actually got into math in this particular set of experiments, and Pepperberg said that she was testing a younger bird named Griffin. That she has a laboratory with several other African gray parrots that has grown since she started with Alex. And so there are many younger birds that are tested on language and math abilities. And so Pepperberg, according to the Scientific American article, says Pepperberg didn't get the idea to probe Alex's ability to add until she was testing whether another parrot named Griffin could equate sound sentences with quantities. She played 2 clicks, hoping Griffin would squawk 2, but he said nothing. 2 more clicks. Alex, who was in the same room, chimed in with 4. 2 more clicks, and Alex said 6. Pepperberg says that she just looked at him and said, "You want to do addition? Fine." And so came some experiments. Found that Alex was actually able to take plastic shapes of numbers and order them correctly from 0 to 8. Alex was capable of also adding numbers like 1 plus 7 equals 8. Able to up to a maximum sum of 8. 8 was his max. He could order the numbers correctly. He equated the symbols with the appropriate number of objects. So if the symbol was shown to him and he was asked to get a similar number of objects, he would know how many objects that would mean. And he also was capable, if there were objects shown to him sequentially from beneath a number of cups. And so there would be 3 cups in front of him, and the researcher would show him what was under the different cups and then ask him how many. And Alex could add up how many objects had been shown to him under the cups to give a correct answer. And so
if he picked a cup and then they showed him that it wasn't in one of the other ones, would
right. I don't know if they
switch?
tested him on that.
That would be great to know.
I know. But anyway, the results of the study, not complete because he died before the experimental sets were completed of heart failure, unfortunately. He was a 31-year-old African gray parrot. They do suggest that Alex, as an individual, maybe not as a species, but that particular bird, Alex, was probably smarter, better at mathematics than other chimpanzees who have been tested at similar tasks, and other non-human primates who have also been given similar tasks. So this African gray parrot, very smart bird, enjoyed language and maths. And he lives on in science. And there's a great book that Irene Pepperberg wrote about her experiences with Alex. So if you're interested in learning about what it was like to train this bird and work with this bird, she's written a fabulous book. I think that about does it for our show. We made it to the end. We did. On next week's show, we're going to be talking with the one and the only Carl Zimmer.
All right. Excellent.
Yeah. We'll be talking about his planet of viruses.
He's created his own planet.
We're excited. And I want to give a few shout outs. I want to say, give some shout outs to Jeremy, Doug, Eddie, Arthur, Rohan, Darren, Melissa, William, David, Robert, Michael, R. Michelle, Eric, Christopher, Walter, Brian, and Eric. These are people who are all ordered 2010 science music compilation CDs. I just want to say thanks for your orders. I appreciate it. I hope you enjoy them when you receive the CDs.
Total Radness. Yeah, thank you everybody for listening. We hope you enjoyed the show. Twis is available as a podcast. Just search for This Week in Science in the iTunes directory, or if you have an Android device, you can look for Twis for Droid. That's Twis, the number 4 Droid app in the Android marketplace.
We also have an iPhone app that's in the Apple marketplace if you look for Twis. And for more information on anything that you've heard here today, show notes are going to be available on our website, twis.org, with links to stories that we discussed tonight. We also want to hear from you, so email us. I'm Kirsten, Kirsten, at thisweekinscience.com, and that's Justin at thisweekinscience.com.
Be sure to put Twis, TWIS, somewhere in the subject line, or your email will be spam filtered into oblivion. You can also contact us on Twitter, at Dr. Kiki or at Jacksonfly. We love your feedback. If there's a topic you would like us to cover or address, a suggestion for an interview, please let us know.
And we will be back here next week, same time, same place. We hope that you will join us once again for more great science-y goodness.
And if you've learned anything from today's show, remember,
it's all in your head.
This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science, it's the end of the world. So I'm setting up shop, got my banner unfurled. It says the scientist is in, I'm gonna sell my advice. Show them how to stop the robots with a simple device. I'll reverse global warming with a wave of my hand. And all it'll cost you is a couple of grand. Science is coming your way, so everybody listen to what I say. I use the scientific method for all that it's worth, and I'll broadcast my opinion all over the earth. Cause it's This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 I've got one disclaimer, and it shouldn't be news, that what I say may not represent your views, but I've done the calculations and I've got a plan. If you listen to the science, you may just yet understand that we're not trying to threaten your philosophy. We're just trying to save the world from jeopardy. 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 And This Week in Science is coming your way. So everybody listen to everything we say. And if you use our method instead of rolling a die, we may rid the world of toxoplasma gondii. Cause it's This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 Got a laundry list of items I want to address, from stopping global hunger to dredging Loch Ness. I'm trying to promote more rational thought, and I'll try to answer any question you've got. But how can I ever see the changes I seek when I can only set up shop 1 hour a week? This Week in Science is coming your way. You better just listen to what we say, and if you've learned anything from the words that we've said, then please just remember it's all in your head. Cause it's This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 This Week in 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 Science.